One cow, one lantern, a whole city on fire. That's the version your elementary school teacher told you. You probably with a solemn face, maybe even a tear in their eye. But what if we told you the true story of the Great Chicago Fire is a blazing mess of misfires, scapegoats, flaming sausages, and historical cover-ups that would make even the Vikings turn back and say, "Nope, not our kind of raid." Let's rewind to 1871, an A time when pants were flammable, buildings were tinder boxes, and people thought insurance was a suggestion. Spoiler, it's not the cow's fault. Probably. It was Sunday night, October 8th, 1871. The kind of crisp autumn evening where you could practically hear the leaves crunching underfoot as you walked the rickety wooden sidewalks of Chicago. Inside their homes, folks were winding down with family dinners, violin music, and fireside chats. These were not luxury homes. Most were built entirely of wood, sitting shoulder to shoulder, practically begging to be turned into kindling. Even the sidewalks and roads were made of timber. The entire city was a lumberjack's fever dream. Weeks of dry weather had left Chicago crackling with tension. It hadn't rained in ages, and the city was parched like a matchbook left out in the sun. The Chicago Fire Department was already exhausted, having battled a massive blaze the night before. Fire Chief Robert Williams, who might have been the last man in the city with a working hose and a working sense of urgency, was still patching up bruises from Saturday's inferno. Horses were still recovering. Water pressure was laughable. Fire stations severely undermanned. And despite all this, the city slept. That is, until a flame appeared in the West Side barn, owned by Irish immigrants, Patrick and Catherine O'Leary. This is the birthplace of the legend. Now, did Mrs. O'Leary really light a lantern to milk her cow late at night, only to have the ungrateful bovine kick it over in an act of clumsy rebellion? The newspapers sure thought so. The public ate it up like free sausages at a neighborhood fair. One cartoon even showed a guilty-looking cow with matches in its hoof. But there's a big problem. Catherine O'Leary swore she was in bed that night. She never went out to milk the cow. She even had witnesses. And decades later, Michael Ahern, the journalist who first floated the cow theory, confessed he made the whole thing up because it made for a great story. And it was a great story. A cow starting the most famous urban fire in American history. It practically wrote itself. No need to question the city's planning, the infrastructure, the cheap construction, or the total lack of fire prevention strategy. Nope, blame it on the cow. But while everyone was busy pointing hooves, the fire was busy becoming an uncontrollable monster. Flames leapt from one house to the next, gobbling up entire blocks in minutes. Hot winds whipped through the alleys and lanes, tossing embers into the sky like deadly fireflies. One flaming shingle could fly several blocks and start a new inferno. The fire spread so fast, people barely had time to grab their valuables. Some didn't even have time to put on shoes. Panic ensued. Families ran into the streets with mattresses on their backs and babies in baskets. People tried to escape by boat, by horse, or on foot. Some tried burying their belongings in the backyard. Others fled with chamber pots full of coins, praying the porcelain wouldn't shatter. One man tried to save his piano by wheeling it into the street, where it promptly caught fire. And let's not forget the local sausage vendor who refused to leave his cart. According to eyewitnesses, he stood defiantly in front of his sausages, shouting, "These links will not burn without a fight." They burned, quickly. Chicago's river, which should have been a natural firebreak, betrayed them. It was filled with oily runoff from factories and waste from slaughterhouses, a floating stew of flammability. The fire leapt across the water like it was hopping over a crack in the sidewalk. The fire department, already battered and broken, couldn't keep up. Alarm boxes were few and far between, and some were outright ignored. One fire alarm operator dismissed the first reports as false alarms. By the time reinforcements arrived, it was far too late. To make things even more surreal, the courthouse bell, which rang to warn of fire, melted in the heat. Literally melted. That's how hot the blaze was. Stone buildings cracked, wooden homes exploded into ash, and as the flames closed in, the only thing that could stop the fire was something not found in any fire manual: rain. Finally, on the evening of October 10th, the skies opened up. Rain fell in the sheets, dousing the remaining hotspots. The fire was over, but Chicago was not the same. It looked like a battlefield. Over 17,000 buildings had been destroyed. An estimated 100,000 people were left homeless. The smell of smoke hung into the air for days, and the once vibrant city center was now a smoldering skeleton. But here's where the story gets even wilder. Mrs. O'Leary, whose barn had burned like a torch, became a national villain. Her name was dragged through the mud. Her family faced harassment and threats. Her cow, the original fire scapegoat, was parodied in plays and songs, and no one seemed to care that the evidence was thin, the source was dubious, and the entire theory was based on a lie. Historians now believe the fire may have started from something far more boring: a dropped cigarette, a careless match, or spontaneous combustion of hay. But blaming a poor immigrant family, especially one that was Irish and Catholic, fit the prejudices of the time. And so, for over a century, the cow took the fall. In the aftermath, Chicago vowed to rebuild. And rebuild it did with a vengeance. Steel replaced wood. Brick replaced timber. Architects descended upon the city with dreams and blueprints. Within decades, Chicago became a model of modern urban planning. The skyline rose higher than ever. And the fire, it became a legend, taught in schools, whispered in bars, and forever linked to a cow that, if it could talk, would probably sue for defamation. To this day, there's a statue near the supposed origin of the fire, a dignified bronze cow, looking heroic. She didn't ask for this fame. She didn't endorse the chaos. But she stands there, silently judged, silently judging. And what about the gamblers? That's right. An alternate theory emerged years later, that a group of drunk cigar-smoking gamblers had snuck into the O'Leary barn to play cards, knocked over a lantern, and ran off laughing. No one could prove it, but it made just enough sense to stick around in the lore, floating just behind the cow, like a shadow with a gambling addiction. Other theories? Oh, they get weirder. Some suggested it was a meteor from the ongoing Perseid meteor shower, because sure, why not blame space? And of course, there were conspiracy theorists who insisted the fire was an insurance scam gone wrong. Apparently, someone tried to torch one property for profit and accidentally turned it into a citywide barbecue. We'll never really know the truth. But the one thing everyone agrees on, Chicago learned its lesson the hard way, and it never forgot. So the next time you hear someone blame a disaster on a cow, remember, it might just be a cover-up. History is written by the Windsor in this case, by bored journalists with a flair for barnyard drama. Like, subscribe, and comment below. Who do you think really started the Great Chicago Fire? Was it careless gamblers? A meteor? Government conspiracy? Or maybe, just maybe, the cow was framed? And if you enjoyed this blazing hot tale of truth, lies, and flammable cities, follow us for more ridiculous stories your textbooks conveniently skipped. Next week, did Napoleon really lose to bunnies? You'd be surprised. Here's the final twist. No official cause of the fire was ever determined. That's right after all the investigations, the finger-pointing, and the songs about bovine arsonists. The Great Chicago Fire remains officially unexplained. It might have been an accident. It might have been preventable. But one thing's for sure. It wasn't just about a cow. It was about a city built to burn, and a story too juicy not to tell. And sometimes, history chooses the fun version over the true one, especially when there's a cow involved.